Hey there, YouTubers. So it's Dave, still in Bahrain, and trying to record this video a little different than I would back when I'm in the U.S. with my capture card and OBS and good microphone and all that other those good toys, right? So this is almost like I'm doing a presentation at a university or something here. But this video, we're going to look at, should you choose the i5-13600k, the i5-12600k, 12700, or a 13700. You'll notice not looking at the versions that don't have integrated graphics, but we'll talk about that a little bit in this video. Otherwise, this title, would go much further, right? Instead of 4 different CPUs, we'd be talking about 8. So kind of the agenda. I'm going to give you some preliminary thoughts, and we'll compare the i5-13600k to the i5-12600k. I have on both of those. Then we'll look at the i7-13700 versus the i7-12700. I have the 12700 and the 13700 is on its way. Motherboards, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then maybe discuss, which is better for you. And we'll have a little summary at the end. So preliminary thoughts here, folks. Obviously, 13th Gen Unlocked has been out 2 or 3 months now, and now the locked CPUs are available. So one thing I mentioned earlier, whether to buy one of these CPUs with integrated graphics or without it. The ones that don't have integrated graphics have an F in the name. So really for the new builders, get the one that has integrated graphics. If you have a lot of computer experience and can troubleshoot, or potentially have more than one graphics card, picking the F type is probably beneficial to you to save the money. For those of you that don't have the experience, just the mere headache alone of wondering if your graphics card is working or some issue with the CPU, those issues can be eliminated by buying the CPU that has a integrated graphics. It also means one less component to set up before you get your computer to boot to BIOS. So in general, prices for all 13th Gen are higher than their comparative 12th Gen CPUs. Over time that may change. If you're watching this in 2 or 3 years, that may, not necessarily always be true. But and in general, 13th Gen has the potential to use more electric than a similar 12th Gen. As of January 2023 is when I'm making this video, it is very likely you will need a BIOS update before you can install that 13th Gen into a 600 series LGA 1700 motherboard. We'll talk a little bit more about motherboards later in the video. In general, the multi-core score benchmark of a locked i7 is greater than an unlocked i5, and a locked i9 would be greater than an unlocked i7. Overclocking a unlocked CPU can bring those values closer. Looks like I had a little typo there. But yeah, if you're not going to overclock something like an i5 13600k, but you want that high multi-core score, that's a situation where going with the locked i7 may be better for you. The same to be said about the locked i9 13900 or versus the unlocked i7 13700k. A lot of performance in gaming, those will be very similar. But if you're doing something that requires a higher multi-core score, you may want to spend the money on the locked i9. All right, next. So we're going to jump into comparison here. I don't have any gaming comparisons in the video, but if you check out my channel, you can find quite a few with the same graphics card. So the i5-13600k versus i5-12600k. Obviously, the i5-13600k is significantly better in benchmarks. It's very impressive in benchmarks in comparison to it. In gaming, you'll notice a moderate increase in performance. Does that justify the increase in price? That's another story. So the next line, and I'm actually going to point to this. This is your i5-13600k. That is the i5-13600kf. $11 difference. So for troubleshooting purposes, this may be a better bet, right? i5-12600k, i5-12600kf. In this case, it really doesn't matter. This is, in my opinion, a better bet for you, regardless of your experience level. You can see the price difference, pretty significant between the two. 53, what is that? $71 or $72 between those two processors. May or may not be worth it to you all. Both of these CPUs do not come with a stock cooler. You will need to purchase a premium cooler. You can get away with buying a cheaper, $20 to $30 cooler. However, that may not be your best bet. A lot of you, I would expect to spend, $100 or more if you're going to overclock. And that would correspond with something like a big air cooler. I say expect to spend over 100. Doesn't mean you can't get by with $60. But most of the decent CPU coolers are around 100 and up. All right. Now temperatures, you may not be able to see this too well, this section of the screen, but the i5-13600k can run hotter than the i5-12600k from not too much noticeable difference to considerably. And this was dependent on the motherboard. So I could put that CPU, the i5-12600k, in something like my MSI Pro Z690, not have a whole lot of issues with temperature with it, but then I could throw the 13600k in there, and suddenly that thing is 10 to 20 degrees warmer. Now, same thing said, throw that in one of my better motherboards like the Aorus Z690 Elite AX. The temperature difference between the two is, maybe 2 to say 8 degrees, somewhere in there, depending on what it is. So, and not as significant. Could that be, I got a crappy motherboard? That, when I say that MSI Pro could be crappy, that is, potentially true. I've gotten a lot of comments from people that have MSI Pro motherboards that have said they've had some similar issues. So could be, the power stages, VRM, a lot of other things could be the cause for why that CPU runs hotter in that motherboard. Now, i7-13700 versus i7-12700. Obviously, the i7-13700 is significantly better in benchmarks. In gaming, you're going to see an improvement in the gaming from the i7-13700. However, is it worth the price? So this is the i7-13700, $409, i7-13700F, $379. Significant price difference there, right? $30. Definitely in this case, if you are an experienced builder, it is worth spending, it's worth the savings to go with the F version. Now the i7-12700 versus the i7-12700F. And these prices, folks, were from Amazon and Newegg. Somebody did note that Anton Online, which I've bought from before, has some CPUs cheaper. I don't know if they have the lock CPUs yet. A lot of time they end up selling their stuff on eBay as well. But yeah, right here, folks, significant savings. Now looking at the price difference between these, $84, is that worth the improvement in performance? That's something you would have to decide on. CPU cooler, both of these are going to come with a stock CPU cooler. Personally, you know, I always replace them. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to, but if you have a situation where you're not getting a lot of, your case does not have good airflow, then you may need to purchase a premium cooler. Once again, you can get by, you know, spend an additional 20 to 30. Maybe you want better cooling on top of that, or RGB, and you might end up spending $50 to $100. All right. Temperatures, I7-13700 is going to run a little hotter. You know, depending on what you're doing, right? If you're just surfing the internet, not going to notice any difference. If you're running benchmarks, potentially you've got power limits set to unlimited, then you may also experience even hotter temperatures. Now, potentially I have not bought the motherboard, but there may be a motherboard where you can do a base clock frequency type overclock, which would provide really impressive results from the i7-13700 if it's possible to do that. The i7-12700, I5-12400, and I believe the other lock 12 gens were capable of doing that. And yeah, power usage, so up to, you know, 39 watt difference. And eventually we'll run the benchmark for the i7-13700, and you will most likely see me hit that. And because of that, for benchmarks, you may need a premium cooler because you're hitting over, you know, 200 watts. So let's talk motherboards. I have crossed off H610M, folks. Don't even waste your time with that one, right? B660 and the H670 are so similar. So we're talking about, you know, the real differences there, but you've also got micro ATX for both those, and I left off ITX, so that's just what ended up way over here. But that's another choice to look at. But these motherboards are the best deal for somebody that's got a 12th gen lock CPU or a 12th gen unlocked CPU with no plans to overclock, right? So if you're not going to overclock one of those CPUs and you buy a high quality B660, you're going to get pretty much the same performance numbers that you'd get out of a Z690, all right? You may even get better numbers than you would out of Z690i, which is the ITX version. Now the Z690, Z690M, Z690 ITX, those are best for unlocked 12 gens, right? So the I7-12700k, I9-12900k. Looking towards the future, B760, B760M, H770, H770M. These are going to be your best deal for 13th gen lock CPUs or 13th gen unlocked CPUs with no plans for overclock. Now, you can use the 12th gen in here, right? But you're not going to get any additional performance improvements from those motherboards. That said, these may support higher RAM and higher RAM speeds. If that was the case, then, you know, putting a 12th gen in there would be probably the only reason that you might take your 12th gen and put it in one of those. Otherwise, these motherboards are more expensive than those, right? The same with these, the Z790 to the Z690. Price difference between these two was about 60 bucks the last I checked, all right? Not quite as big a difference between these families, but still there is, you know, $10 to $20 difference, I think, from what I saw. So Z790, best for unlocked 13th gen CPUs. You, of course, can use an unlocked 12th gen in it. You can use any of the CPUs in any of these motherboards, right? If you ever look at CPU compatibility, you'll find they're all compatible. But there are certain motherboards that certain CPUs are best for. Now, getting back to what I had said earlier, BIOS update. Reason I didn't put 13th gen in here, a lot of you that are watching my channel are newer builders, okay? If you're a more experienced builder, then you're probably watching, you know, some of the other stuff that the big channels have, right? But those guys are spending money on the, super expensive graphics cards, they always have the most expensive CPUs, where this channel, a little more basic stuff. But these motherboards, they'll support 13th gen, right? However, you need a BIOS update. And as I've shown in a lot of other videos, if you're going to buy one of these 600 series motherboards, buy one that you can update the BIOS without having a CPU installed if you want to go 13th gen. The reason I've separated this 12th and 13th is mainly, for the newer folks, less troubleshooting to do if you kind of look at it this way, right? If I want to stick a 13th gen in one of these, I need a BIOS update. When will that change? Sometime in the future, the manufacturers will ship all these with updated BIOS. Right now, good chance it will have an older BIOS in it. If you buy it off eBay, it may have an older BIOS in it, and I'm talking if you're buying used. If you're buying new, most likely it has an older BIOS. Now, you may find on eBay somebody says, hey, I've updated the BIOS, and it's 13th gen ready, right? So that's something yours truly does a lot. I don't hold on to my motherboards forever, right? I'll update them and put them up there and try to get most of my money back. So yeah, less headache, and I just hit the TV. Less headache here if you just stick with 12th gen on these and 13th here. However, if you are confident in doing your BIOS update, you'll get 13th gen to work here. Now, some motherboards do not allow you to have a BIOS update without a CPU installed. In that case, the cheapest route is to go Celeron G6900, update one of these motherboards, and then put your 13th gen in. All right, so folks, which CPU is better for you? Now, I didn't say CPU motherboard combo, but you could also factor that into this. So for those of you that you'd like to tinker, all right, and that means, hey, I'm interested in getting the most performance out of my CPU, then maybe you are looking at the I7-13700k, or excuse me, the I5-13600k or the I5-12600k. Then it's a matter of, the price. Do you want to spend the extra money for the additional performance, all right? Now, if you're somebody that just wants to set it and forget it, you may pick, just the i7-13700 or the i7-12700. Obviously, quite a difference in price there. Both of those are going to be pretty good. But if you are want to set it and forget it, you could actually go with any of the 4 CPUs, right? So then you might look at, which one has the highest electric cost. Your CPUs that end with K are going to be, have the capability of using more power. And that's, based on how your settings are as well. If you're overclocking, you're using even more power. If you've set your power limits to unlimited, you're using more power. But just surfing the internet, you're going to find those CPUs, all 4 of those are going to use about the same amount of electric. If you only care about gaming, all right, well, overclocking doesn't necessarily always mean you're going to get an improvement in gaming. Having a higher multi-core score does not always mean you're going to do better in gaming. Potentially something like an i5-13600k is going to give you better gaming performance than the i7-13700. All right. Now, with an overclock, I can get the multi-core score between the i5-13600k and the i7-13700 to be closer. If you have a game that you like and you find out multi-core score is the way to go, then maybe you pick the i7-13700 over the i5-13600k. Once again, looking at the price, that may be the way to go, but you may also decide, hey, both of those options are too expensive, and then now you're looking at the 12th gen i5-12600k or the i7-12700. So obviously, price is going to factor into that, right? Now, are you planning to upgrade and already have an LG A1700 motherboard? So maybe you have an i3-12100. In this case, folks, the sky is the limit, but once again, depending on where you want to go. Is it just about gaming? Then maybe you want to upgrade to the i5-13600k. If it is about something like 4K editing, you know, there is the potential, if I remember correctly, that something like the i7-13700 would do better. Or if you had an application that multi-core benchmarking, you know, having a higher score there was going to make you more productive in your job, then that is probably the way to go, right? Then you start looking at return on investment. How long does it take to pay for this additional cost in CPU? And you will find, folks, if your only job is, let's say, 4K editing, and you were only had one computer and it tied you up the longer it ran, that may be a situation where you want the most powerful CPU that you can get. All right, so that's going to do it, folks. I'm going to just basically, you know, leave it in your hands, right? Which one should you choose? It's really not so clear cut, right? You're talking, we had 4 CPUs here. Gaming is probably your best bet is the i5-13600k if you have the money, right? If this was, hey, I have unlimited money, I'm going to get the i5-13600k, I'm going to put the best CPU cooler with it, okay? Now, if I'm a little low on funds, you know, then going the i5-12600k is probably your best bet. Now, if I'm somebody that cares about multi-core score, and once again, I have quite a bit of cash, and that application that I'm using is heavily reliant on the multi-core aspect, you know, then you're probably looking at i7-13700 or the i9-13900 or i9-13900k, right? So you have those options. Now, limited budget, maybe you're looking at i7-12700, all right? Thanks for checking out the video, folks. I hope you got something out of it. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you.